Let's share the entire screen.
Depends.
Oh, why is that turned in there? All right. I'm going to switch it to letting us see it on the screens now. Okay, are you on the stream? Or
Not yet. Is it up?
it should be.
I'll check it on my laptop.
But yeah, we'll just need to confirm the video's going, and then we'll see to make sure. I guess we'll probably also want to make sure that it also gain the audio from those. Yeah. All right. Do you have any way to check if it's hearing audio? All right. Do you have any way to check if it's hearing? I guess that's what
That'll be good.
Should we wait for anyone else?
Yes, we should wait a few extra minutes as we change location.
Yeah, you know it's a light day when we can count the total number of people in the room on both hands.
Yeah. There's a chance anyone went to the library instead of what?
I think there's a very, very good chance. I'm going to put a reminder. No. I'd like to find Discord on the computer.
Well, I guess we're going to wait a few minutes for anyone else to get here. Does anyone want to share how their game jam's been going?
I've been drawing a lot of graphics.
Oh,
I'm like the only sprite artist on the team.
what sort of stuff? What sort of style is it?
Old school pixel art. That's not really like accurate to anything in particular.
Mhm.
Like it's too much to color to be NES, but it's too unprofessional to be anything that's 16-bit.
Mm.
I guess maybe a closest approximation would be the 8-bit arcade games you saw in the early to mid 80s.
Mhm.
Like, have you ever played a Taito game?
I don't think so. No.
Bubble Bobble, New Zealand Story.
Maybe Bubble Bobble. That sounds a bit familiar, but.
Well, that's kind of the style I went for.
Mhm.
And I was told it looked too cute and had to make it less cute. But yeah, that sort of thing. I've also done some music for the game.
Mhm.
Because that's what I signed up for in the first place.
Does anyone else want to share?
I'm trying to remember 5.
Oh, that's cool.
Me too.
I haven't actually picked that up for about a week.
Mhm.
So, I've mostly been back to Fallout 4.
Oh,
So,
I remember. Yeah, from the Discord server. That was cool.
yeah, no, I haven't made anything in a while, so.
All right, you good, Lugo?
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, no, it's all really cool. I really like seeing all the different assets you've made. It was very high quality.
Yeah, I'm about to get some more tools to make it even easier. Looking forward to that.
Well, good luck with it.
Thank you.
I guess we could go ahead and get started, since I'm not sure if we'll be getting that many more people.
Okay.
All right. So this presentation is just very short because I already went over a little bit of an overview last time, and of course what Godot was. So mainly this is just a smaller overview of how we're going to be continuing it. So this is going to be a little less emphasis on coding this time, instead a bit more on say how to get your own sprite sheets and put them in Godot, and really more also how you should organize those, as well as also animating your own sprites using the inbuilt animation programs, adding your own sound, and two different ways for how you should sort of be doing that, and also how to add a main menu and add parallax layers for a little bit extra depth to your games. All right. So I'm going to go back into the Godot project we were working on last time. I can give you guys a minute so you can get it back open. And has everyone downloaded the stuff I sent over to Discord to try and get for it, if you're following along? Actually, could I just use show of hands for who is following along this time?
I'll follow along real quick. Actually, I downloaded that.
Oh yeah, I can give you guys just a few minutes.
Besides the fact that it's easier to write, is there any other reason? I would just say in general for Godot, you see a bit more GD like stuff that's supported. So like, let's see when we want to get just matches online, just bring more in JavaScript than C#. I'm just curious.
Yeah, both work just fine. I just personally use GD script. So when you guys have that stuff downloaded, what you should be doing is you should also go into your folder you have for it, which will probably be under your documents, and it will then have that name of the project you made. And you'll want to probably create a new folder called textures to go ahead and put it in. It's not necessarily required to work in Godot, but it's one of the things I feel like is better for organizing your stuff.
Where you say you put the download for the Godot project?
Like all that's actually, are you asking like for where the project is, or just
Where
where?
the project is.
Let's see on yours. It just should be under documents and then under folder. Oh, you mean from the Discord? Let's go in general. Just in there earlier. So it starts from that spreadsheet, and then just a few pictures and 2 sound effects.
Oh, just download these?
Yeah. Yeah, the textures you'll just put in that textures folder, and then I'm also
Textures, the things I'm downloading?
yeah the pictures and the sprite sheet. So basically, we're just going to be updating the graphics a little, that demo we made, so that we could get a bit more practice with how to also add some sprites and use that sprite sheet for a lot of different stuff. And I'm also going to make I'm just going to call it SFX. So I'm also going to make a folder for sound effects. So similarly, I'm going to grab those 2 sounds that were there. So these ones, if I got them just quickly from freesound.com, I believe is the name. That's a good website to go to. You just want some quick sound effects for a game. And oftentimes the stuff on there is not only free, but also they give you quick instructions for how you should credit them and the like. So when you have that stuff ready, you should just have your SFX and your textures folders with the images and the textures and those 2 sound effects in the FSX. Out of curiosity, are you following along with this one? That's okay. We were just getting the stuff I sent over Discord in the general channel. So the images I sent you are going to textures folder you'll make, and the sound effects, which should just be 2 files, will go in SFX folder.
Is the actual Godot project on here as well, or no?
That one, no. Do you need it? I'll just I'll go ahead and just send this version of it. Yeah, that freeze feature would come in handy. Make it so it does not show the Discord when it shows up. That'd be a little weird for a stream. If the Discord does show up. Okay, you know, I'm just gonna kill Discord for task manager real quick to make it restart properly. I don't know why it's not behaving right. There you are.
I guess since you were here, I'll just mention real quick. We'll be going over a variety of smaller features this time. So there'll be some stuff like parallax layers, how to make a main energy, how to add in those sound effects, and also integrate the sprite, which should be used in that sprite sheet I sent.
So it should be a bit less involved with the coding this time. There we go. Let's see, this one should be it. All right. If you needed the file, it's on the Discord now. You just download the file, unzip it wherever you want to have it, and then when you go in Godot, you just go to import, and then you should just be able to navigate towards the project file for that, and it should work. All right. Should I continue, or do you want a minute to get that handled? Yeah.
You said you wanted a folder named textures and one named SFX?
Yeah, it should be in that one I sent you, actually.
I just had to put over the work the one too. Yeah, it's all here. Okay.
All right. So to start off with, we're going to start utilizing that new sprite sheet. So one thing we can do is we can go back to our old tile map over here. And while the icon served this job nice and well, we're going to add that new one. So we're going to go to Atlas like we did before. So plus Atlas. And then we're going to navigate to our textures. And we're going to click on the file demo sprite sheet. So for those following along, do you see it? And I can navigate again to it if anyone would like me just to show that real quick.
This is in the test level file.
Yeah, I went to test level. I went to tile map layer, and then I went to tile set on the bottom. Then I went to that plus sign, Atlas, and then this lets me go into that textures folder to grab it. All right. Does anyone still need a minute?
It's saying that there's an error while parsing the file test level.c.
Oh.
Not really sure what that is.
Let me see. For you. Since the only pop-up should be is like the sort of one.
It's kind of looking at games.
That is an area you get sometimes.
What version of Godot do you have?
Oh, that's right. If you have the older version, it won't work because it requires tile map layer.
Version 4.2.
Yeah, this is 4.3. That's the issue.
Okay, so I need that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm having the same issue right now.
Yeah.
4.4.
Please, I believe.
Through the Godot application or can you go to the website?
Usually, you just go to the website. All right. Well, for those able to follow along, it should give you a pop-up like this one, just for those transparent areas. We're just going to click yes for now. And when we hit in there, we should see these new tiles. Oop. Actually, we're going to select all of them in a bit. This one's going to require a bit more setup. So first, when you look at the tiles, you'll notice that in this, like how it automatically loads it, they're all a little split up more. For instance, these little spikes of the character, they're all kind of kept as just being quadrants, which we're not going to really want. So what we can do is we can go down to texture region down here. And we're going to set both of those to 32 to match those proper sizes. And that will fix that little issue. So that should fix that. We don't really want these weird little things down here, but it shouldn't really mess with what we're doing, so we can just leave that for now. But that remakes this tile set. And then we're going to go ahead and select a few of them. So I am first going to select the ones that I'm going to be adding those that rectangle sort of thing we did before with. So in that case, for this one, I'm just going to do the dirt, that little grass block, and this rock block. So there. So you can hold shift while you're clicking them, and that will let you just click each of them and have them all selected. You can go down to physics layer 0 like we did before. And then similarly, we're going to do the add polygon tool. And we're going to zoom out a little before we start that. And then we're going to click on each of those corners like we did last time. And then finish off our square. And that will finish on those ones. But this time we also have these triangle ones, so we can add a little bit more geometry to our levels. And that should be simple, where instead of just doing those for like a square, we're just going to do these 3. And there we go. Same thing for this one. And sometimes you need to zoom out a little to get the whole block in there. Oh. There. And then we can also do these ones. Actually, that one's fine. All right. So with that, we have a different little atlas that we can start working with. So when we go to our tile map down here, we can start painting with those ones instead. So I can say grab these. Oh, that's the wrong one. You'll want to make sure you have your cursor tool selected. You should be able to click on that rectangle like we did before. Click on the dirt. So these ones are loading a little weird, but we'll figure it out. Hang on. Yeah, basically we can just start redoing some of our geometry with some extra shapes. So now we actually have these little proper slopes this time. We have some slightly better textures. So that's just how we get started using the sword tile map to just make something a little that just looks a little better and also gives us some better geometry. Now, I'm not going to redo this whole level. You can redo on your own if you'd like, but I'm just doing this just to help demonstrate. So next, I'm going to go over to our player, and we're going to redo the sprite for him, since I also similarly think our icon here is kind of also served out its purpose. It's a little on the elongated side. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that old sprite we had. And then instead of a sprite, I'm going to add as a child node to our player. I'm going to go to animated. And then you're going to go to animated sprite 2D. Does anyone need a second to catch up? All right. So animated sprite 2D. And then under the inspector, we're going to go to the sprite frames, empty, and then we're going to create some new sprites frames. And we'll click on those. And that opens up the little sprite frames tool on the bottom, so we can start giving it some animations. So there are some different ways to do it. You could have individual files for all your animations, and then you just pull up like add frame from file. But that's usually a lot of files, so instead you'll make those sprite sheets like we had before. So you click on, I'll show that one more time again. You click on add frames from sprite sheet, and then you can choose your sprite sheet here and do open. And then you can go ahead and start choosing. So I'm going to do the idle first. So I'm just going to add just the single frame of the person kind of just standing there. And we'll notice already that's not quite the size that we had before. So we can just tinker with that a little. So we can go to our transform. We can say make it like 1.3 times bigger, or say 1.7. And sort of increase that till we get something that seems kind of close to what we want. That gets too large. And 3 is around about okay. But you'll also notice at this point that's very blurry on the sides. So that is a thing you'll notice with a lot of your textures in Godot. But that's just a simple little fix. Since you can go down to texture under your canvas item, and then you'll see a few options. And you're going to go to filter. And instead of it just being inherit, which will just be whatever's on top of it, would you also leave it for everything that would be below, say the sprite, for instance? You're going to choose nearest, which will make it so basically the same pixel art you imported. Usually, by default in Godot, it's something like a linear, which adds that sort of blurriness. And nearest is what you usually want when you're using a lot more pixel art, unless you want to keep that blurriness for some reason. So anyway. So this is our little just idle animation, which is not really animation, it's just the person standing there. But then we're going to add another little animation just by clicking this little button. And we can rename that to our walking. And then we are similarly going to pull from that same sprite sheet. But this time we're going to pick these frames for walking. There. And if we want to see how that looks already, we can just click on this play from selected animation from current position, and that will just start showing it doing whatever you have in there for the frames. And if it seems a little too slow, we can just up the FPS a little. So say to like around 10. And if we think that looks good, we can just leave that there. And one thing we'll also want to do once we have this animation set up is for whatever one we have as our idle, we're going to want to go down to this little thing that says autoplay on load, and you'll want to click that because whatever is your idle or just whatever one you want your player to start out as, you want to have that autoplay on. Since that will mean whenever it's loaded in, it'll be starting on that rather than you having to script it to immediately go to that. So anyway, from there, now that we actually have these animations in there, we can go to our player script. Does anyone need a second to get the animations going? Oh. Yeah, it's all good. Do you need any help? So with the animation set up and with the autoplay on, we can go ahead and go to our player script. And we already have all this code for them moving and the like. So what we can do is we can add in something to actually make it switch to the movement animation. So in which case, an easy way is just to have it where it's like if we hit any of those keys, so if input dot is action pressed, and then we're going to check if it's left, or then we can just copy this. We can do right. Oh, whoops. And then what we will do is we'll do a little cash sign, and then we're going to type in the name of that node that we have. So that's going to be animate sprite 2D in this case. So we're going to be calling that little node there. And then we're going to be changing its animation. And in this case, that animation should be called walking. And then what we could also do is we could just do a quick else. And then if it's not walking, we'll just change it to that default. This,
Walking, like if there was a command in this, or is
Oh.
that, like,
no, that's just the name of the one that we called that little animation. So what this should do is it should let us just quickly change that animation that's playing to one that's called that. So we can go back to our test level and we can try that out. So we already see that works a little. It does change the animation, though the one issue is it also doesn't really flip it around, which we also probably do not want for our little guy. Because I don't think people usually like moonwalking places. So that's another simple thing where we're just going to go to our little left and right things, and then we're going to call that animate sprite again. And then we can just call flip. So in this case, we're going to set that to true because we want to flip them whenever it turns left. Because whenever it's loaded in for the animation, it's automatically going right. So we just want to flip it to the left. Whereas for the right, we're going to make sure that's set to false. So if it was going left, it switches to the proper way. Actually, hang on. Do you need to see that? Do you have that little bit? All right. So I'm going to go back to the test level. I'm going to get that going. And what we should see is, yep, it flips around. So that way we can get some proper little animations for our person. Now, I will say there are currently not any jump animations and that stuff, but you can also similarly add those. So if we want to,
I was just wondering if there's a way that you can kind of see your animations, like spreadsheet and like everything like that, so you lay it out, so you can enter it. Or would you look at that?
So do you mean just to edit it or just to pull from it? Since editing, I don't think you can do so much in Godot itself. But if you just want to take a look at it,
Or like to see what it's pulling right?
Oh.
It's like on a full sheet.
yeah, so usually I just check it within that little thing itself I showed before, like when you just load it up. So as far as I'm aware, you can't necessarily see the whole thing when you're, oh, hang on. Let me get that back over there. As far as I'm aware, when you just have this little part here, it won't show you the entire sprite sheet if that's what you're asking.
I didn't see it.
Yeah. Like it shows you the ones you have loaded in right now, so you can, arrange your animation right. And there are more tools for it. So like, let's say we wanted this frame to whatever, like to stay for a little longer. Then, for instance, we could copy and paste it. For instance, so we could do like copy, and then paste, and then just move that around. So it's like one thing you can do, or you can just move frames around, so on. So there are some smaller tools in here. But yeah, if you want to properly edit like the actual like frames of the animation, usually you don't want to do as much in Godot. The actual like whatever thing you use to make them in the first place, that's the better way to do it. Maybe there's some proper plugin to do it, but currently I'm not as aware about that. All right. I'm just going to check real quick. I believe. All right. So we could similarly also go and update our other assets. So for instance, we just have this very bland way to end our game, which we probably don't like so much. So in this case, we probably don't want to actually delete it just because that would delete this entire thing. At least we don't want to delete it at first. But similarly, we can add in our little animated thing. But this is going to be for end goal, so we're just going to make a new one. And we're going to make a new sprite frames for this. But instead of actually making a little animation, we're just going to pull a single frame out of there that'll be like the idle, but just is meant to take the place of this. So it's hard to see, so I'm just going to go ahead and make it so this thing is just gone. Okay, so let's see if I do self-modulate. That should only affect that one, yeah. And similarly, if I just get rid of this, if I just make that so it's no. Why are you? Yeah. Well, I guess instead I'll just go ahead and just try and make this thing the parent, since that is something you can usually do. You can go down to make scene root, and that can flip that whole relationship around. And then we're just going to add, well, because we made those scripts, we probably don't want to just straight up get rid of that sprite without redoing everything. So the easiest way is probably, now that that thing is the root, which won't really change much, we can just do toggle visibility, and that way we won't see the icon anymore. But we still get the benefits of actually having all this script for the area and the like. So if you want to make sure, we can also open our little animated one. And then we can go down to our area, well, really this, and we can just resize it to fit this new little goal. So if we do that, then we go back to our test level. That will have changed our little end goal here. So actually, because that might be a little weird, I'm just gonna get rid of that old one, and then I'll grab the new one, just so there's no weird issues with it not liking the new root. There we go. Look at that. All right, where are you? Okay, it's not wanting to. That's a little weird. What's the error it's giving? Sorry, I didn't encounter this when I was trying to mess around to get this stuff to work. So, okay. So we just want to copy and paste this into the test level. But for some reason that's, oh, okay, it's messing with the texture thing of all of those ones. In which case, maybe we just make this unique, and that might fix the issue. All right. In that case, I'm just going to go back to when it was that sprite by just using Control Z, and hopefully it works fine. I was not expecting it to have that weird issue. But that'll just be our redone end goal, and we can open this back up to play real quick. And it works. So you can redo your textures like that. Like, let's say you just have that sort of one where you don't want to have it animated, but you still want to pull from the sprite sheet. So in that case, you usually still want to use that animated sprite, because that lets you just pull real quick from that sprite sheet in that similar way, but you don't need to actually animate it. You just leave it as that single frame. All right. So next, the other feature I wanted to show was sound effects. So there are two ways to implement your sound effects. The first one I'll show now is where you just add as a little thing to go with whatever you're going to have playing it. So in this case, we're going to add a jump sound effect to the player. So to do that, we're going to add as a child node. We're going to do audio. And then let's see. Yep. We're going to go to audio stream player 2D. That's going to be a child of our player. So with that, you get a lot of options in your right hand for how you want to set this up. But the first we got to do is do our stream, which will be the actual file we're going to do. So you can choose a variety of options here, but we're just going to do load, go to our sound effects, and I'm trying to remember which one of these it is. All right, it should be this one. So I'm going to do this for the jump sound effect. If you're following along, I just made the audio stream player 2D node under the player. Then I went to stream, clicked on the empty, did load, and now in the sound effects folder, I'm grabbing the file called, let's see, it has some numbers in front of it. It's colors, crips, and tears, which I think is the person who made it, and then jump platformer.wave. Does anyone need me to stop for a second? All right. So we're just going to grab that. So that's going to be for a little sound effect there. But that's not going to start working necessarily right away until we start actually giving a script to start getting to work. So we go back to our player script. And because this is for the jump, all we really need to do is we're going to do the cache sign again to find that node. So we're just going to do audio stream player 2D because that's the name of it we have here. And then all we should have to do for this is just simply do play. And then let's go back into the game. Let's see. I need to adjust which speakers it's doing it at. Which speakers are you trying to use? Yeah, I'm just going to use these ones so it's at least using my laptop speakers. All right, let's try this now. So what it should do, yeah. So that's the very simple way to do sound effects. You just add as a quick little node, add your sound effect as a stream, and then you just you do that play function to make it work. And it works decently enough for those sorts of things. But the one issue you'll run into if you just do it that very simple way is that let's say you have to run it like multiple times. Like let's say it's a gunshot for like some machine gun, for instance. And sometimes you're almost starting it like right before the last one ended. And that can cause its own issues where it's not really going to play right. So something you can instead do is make your own scene for that sound effect. So you're going to go to add a new scene. We're going to do other node. We're going to take the audio stream player that we had before. And this time, instead of that jump sound effect we had, I'm going to go to load, sound effects. I'm going to grab this player hurt sound. So if you're following along, I just made a new scene. I went to audio stream player 2D, went to stream, did load, and then I went to our sound effects folder. I'm grabbing this file that has player hurt 2 in the name of it. So it should be the first one you have in there. So I'm doing open, and then I'm going to do 2D so we just see how that scene looks. So it should be empty besides just this node. And then what we also want to do is give it a little script. So it's just going to be hurt sound script. We don't really need any of these. Then while we make sure we have that node selected, we're going to go to that node tab. We're going to go to signals. And then you see there's one that says finish. So basically whenever it finishes playing. And we're going to connect this back to its own script. So connect to script. And then we're going to type just a piece of code, Q free. So what we're going to be doing with this sound effect is we're basically going to be having it so it's going to be added in each time you make whatever sound effect you want this to be. And then whenever it finishes itself, it's just going to delete itself. That's what queue-free does in Godot. So I'm just going to save this real quick. It's just going to be hurt SFX. Does anyone need me to wait a minute? All right. So I'm going to go back to our player over here. Well, yeah, actually, I guess not necessarily for our player because of how we set this up before. Instead, we're going to go to our test level because we want to go to wherever we have the hurt player steps. In this case, it's this little function under our test level. And then we're going to have it so each time it runs that, well, we're going to be creating that an instance of that scene that we just made with the sound effect. However, we can't just start doing that since first we have to do onReady our. I'm trying to remember how this is. Cool. Preload. And then we're going to grab that sound effect, so that'll be hurt SFX dot TSCN. So what this bit of code here does is that whenever you load in that level, it's also going to load in that scene. It's not going to add that scene like to the level. That's just having it so it has that ready to spawn in. So in which case, whenever we do that hurt player function, we're going to do var new SFX equal that hurt variable we just made dot instantiate. So that'll create an instance of it. Again, not quite added yet. That's basically just making kind of like instance of it that we're going to be adding in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add its position. We're going to set that equal to our player's position. And then the other thing we're going to do is we're just going to do add child new FSX. Now, what this will be doing, so that's creating that instance. This is setting its position equal to the player's position. Then add child, that variable, actually properly adds it to the level. So when you do add child like this, it'll just be like a child with a scene, like all this other stuff. And that'll actually be the way you want to add stuff in general to your scenes that like dynamically like that. So like, let's say you're spawning in bullets, you'll do it a similar way where you have that scene saved as a variable, and then you'll do that same sort of thing where you instantiate it, set its position, its velocity, and then add as a child to whatever you want it to be, usually the root node. And then the last thing we just need to do is that we're going to go back to that hurt sound effect, inspector, and then we're going to have it as autoplay. So basically, autoplay, we're just having that so whenever it gets spawned in, it's going to immediately start playing, and then that should be working. So we're going back to our test level. Are you guys ready for me to go in and start it? All right. So what should happen is that sound effect now plays each time we do that. So that's just something we have to as a little bit of feedback when we get hurt. And similarly, we still have that jump sound, we have the animations and so on. So from there, I wanted to show how you can also make a main menu for your games. And that's just the bare basics of how to do your sound effects, how to do your animations, and use a sprite sheet. So the other thing you'll really need is your main menus, in which case we're going to create another new scene. We're going to go to user interface. I'm going to switch to 2D so this is easy to look at. So the user interface stuff is kind of similar to 2D where it will be represented in 2D, but they're different nodes. So under here, we're going to do VBox container. And what that means is that anything that's under this little container, all that's going to be vertically aligned and kind of in a list under each other. So that way you don't need to be manually placing the position of everything. But this little orange box thing, that's showing where it is in reference to this whole screen area. So right now it's just starting on the top right corner, but we probably don't want that, so instead we can set it to the middle. To do that, Godot comes with these presets for the anchors you can put in with that green circle up there. So we click that, and you get these different options for them. So you can do center here, so we can just swap it to the center. We do like bottom right corner, just the center bottom, and so on. So I'm just going to go in and put it in the center. And then with that, I'm going to start making the actual main menu. So I'm going to do add child node, and I'm going to do label. So label is like your basic text element. So this one's just 2D platformer demo. And the text is a little bit small right now. That's just the default text size. If you want to change that, you can scroll down the inspector. And then you'll get a few options here for some other stuff you can change. But we really want to change is go into theme overrides. Then you get a few options, and we're going to go down to font sizes. We click this to set it on, and then we can start messing around with that. So we can do like 64, that's a little big. Do like 32, and that's okay. So that's just our main like title text. Next, we can add in like some buttons. So we're just going to add in like one standard button. This is going to just be our start button. So similarly, we can just scroll down, theme overrides, font sizes, and we can set that to 32 as well. And we're going to go back to VBox, button, and then we'll just want to add an exit button at least. You can add more. You can add like say option buttons, and I'll show you how you can make those certain buttons go to different scenes in a second. So font sizes and 32. So I'm just going to rename these for just making sense. Why did it do that there? All right. So with those two buttons, we're going to give it some functionality so that they actually navigate to our game. So for the start button, we're going to do attach like a script. I'm just going to give it start button script as the name. So when you go in there, for the buttons, we won't need the ready or the process. Instead, we're going to make sure we have that button selected. We're going to go to node, and then we're going to go to pressed. We're going to do connect, and we're going to connect it to itself. So that way we can detect each time the button is pressed. And this is the start button we want to go to our game, in which case we do this bit of code. So we're going to do get tree, then change scene to file, and then we're going to select the scene that we want as our game. So in that case, this is the test level. So what this will do is that whenever you click that button, it's going to call this little function, and then it'll switch the scene to that test level we have. So I'm just going to save this so we can test it. So main menu. And now, if you haven't done it before, you can actually define like what you want your startup scene to be. So with the main menu scene now created, I'm going to select this one. So select current. And now we have our little main menu here. You can do some other stuff to make it look a lot better. You can add like background images, for instance. You can make it so your cursor changes to the pointer whenever you hover over buttons. But by default, this is what the buttons and like will be like. They'll just change color a little when you hover your mouse over them. When we click start, it puts us in our little test level, and everything works just fine. And this same bit of code here can also be applied to your end goal that we went over before, where instead of exiting the game, it could switch you to a whole new level. So that's how you'd usually do that. And then lastly, we'll just add the same sort of code we actually did for our little end level before to our exit button. So exit button script. We're going to get rid of this that we don't need. Click on it to make sure we see the signals. Do pressed. Then we're going to make sure it goes to the exit button. And then we're just going to do get tree, quit. So that way when you start up the game, you can either start it or you just have the option to exit if you just didn't want to actually play. So those are some of the basic elements needed to actually get a game going. The last one I had on the list for us to try and do, since we have a little bit of time, is we can go back to our player over here, and we're going to add some parallax layers. So at least in Godot, when you do parallax, it's something you add onto this camera over here. So we have our camera. We're going to do add child node. And before we can add anything to our camera to be showing on the screen, we have to add canvas layer. So this is just for displaying stuff on, like before the camera. And on top of that, you could actually add in your UI elements. Let's say you want to show the health the player has. You'd add it as a UI element under your canvas layer, and that's where you'd be putting it, for instance. But in this case, we're going to be doing parallax. So how it still works mostly in the current version is you select this little parallax background thing down here under canvas layer. And then again, we're going to go to instead parallax layers. This parallax 2D thing is new. I have not messed with it much, and as it says here, it's experimental. So it's up to you if you want to try messing with it. I personally haven't, but but at least I'm going to be showing you how to do the parallax layers. So for this one, we have the little parallax layer here. I'm going to go back to our inspector. So you get a few options in the parallax background, for instance, like for scrolling, for how you can set the base options. But it's usually under the parallax layers where you set it for each individual one. So like let's say we have for scale. So this is not the scale of like say the stuff you're going to put under here, like your mountains, like clouds and the like. This is the scale for how much like they're going to be moving. So as it says here, when it's at 1, like 1 will be like 1-to-1 with like ordinary scrolling. 0, as it says, it just won't even scroll at all. So in this case, we're going to be doing our clouds, and we're going to set it at like 2, well 0.2. Now to add in what you want to actually be scrolling, we're going to add some child nodes. So we're going to do sprite 2D. Then we're going to go to our textures. And that's why you have these clouds, the mountains, and the like. So in this case, I'm going to add in a little bit of clouds. So I'm going to add them over here. So when you're doing your parallax, you're going to notice there's this little rectangle over here. That's where you're going to be wanting to like image where your camera is. So if you want your clouds to be across the top of the screen, you want them to be going across right here instead of like above your player over that way. Does that make sense? All right. So we're just basically just going to add whoops, that's not what I meant. We're just going to add a bunch of those little sprites in there of the clouds, because we just want a bunch of them on top of like the player's screen so they can see them in the background. And we can just like use shift to select 2 of them at once, do Control C, then Control V. There. Nope. Why is it not liking me when I do copy and paste today? There we go. So we can just add a bunch of these. All right. And then if we go back to our test level, what we should see is they're above the player now, and they scroll like slower than anything else in the level. So that's how you can do it for the clouds, but then usually you don't want just those clouds. So you can add more parallax layers to your background. So we're just going to add another one. And we're going to add some sprites to this one like before. And this time instead we're just going to add this basic background, for instance. So like before, we have that rectangle over here. Actually, it's this blue one, my bad. It's not the pink one, it's this blue one. So that's the one you want to be trying to fill up as if that's like behind your player. So we have this little sprite that's going to be for this parallax background. I'm just going to choose the scale tool, and I'm just going to just kind of try and get as big as we want to try and fill up that area. And then from there, we got to go back to our parallax layer, go to motion, and we want it to still be scrolling slower, but we don't want it to be as slow as the clouds. So we can do like 0.4. And if we go back to our level, what we should see is we have that background where it similarly it scrolls slow. Okay, thank you. So that lets you do some very basic parallax layers. So you'd often add like a lot of different little elements to there. Like I had those mountain assets, for instance, you could put in there as well. That could be like behind that brown background, peek out. And the other thing you'd probably want to do is get rid of this little gray background, since that's not going to be quite good for your sky. So there are a few ways to do that. I'm just going to show you do it quickly. Where you just go to project settings, and then this is where you get all of your other little options. For instance, if you go to run, you can choose your main scene here if you didn't select it before. But really, we want to go down to, I believe is it window? So I'm trying to remember which one it is. Is it rendering? No. I'm trying to remember which one. So I remember one of these, at least, it used to give you the option to change that color back here. Is it this one? It might be this one. I think it's just for the boot splash. Okay, maybe it's not there anymore. I thought there was an option to go in here to do that. But in that case, you probably do like what you do in 3D, where I believe you just go to, yeah. So you probably just go to world environment, do new environment, and you do it this way. So world environment is one way you can set that background. It's just a bit more complicated because often you just have a lot more options, as you can see, for light and the like. You can set like the custom color, and at least we can change the color here. So I believe if we do it this way and try it out, maybe that gets it to work. And wait 1 second. Oh, all right. If I figure that out again, I'll let you guys know. But that may have been that was definitely a bit rushed this time, and I had far less time to prepare. But I hope you guys can at least glean a little bit about how to do all these different little things, at least to understand the basics of the sound effects, the parallax, how to create your own instances of stuff, and probably a few other things. And oh, my laptop's about to die. Yes? Yeah, pretty much. In fact, I'm going to get this charging. I'm going to try and see if I can do this at the same time. But I believe if you go to parallax background, there should be an option to change the layers here. I'm just trying to remember which one it is. Oh, yeah, layer. So you see, by default, it's like the lowest. So you can probably just change that layer around. So instead of it being very, very low, it's very high. So it's above everything else. And that should be able to do like what you wanted. Does anyone have any other questions?
If you miss something today, you can always keep the stream recording.
Yeah, at least it did properly get everything this time. Is there actually a place to even plug this up this time?
Yeah, you don't have to.
Oh. Oh dear. Right. And there. That's probably the end for this one, at least in terms of the presentation, since that was my very quick run through everything I had ready. So I'll go ahead and stop that screen. Oh dear, that's not looking good. We're just going to ignore that. And I'll go ahead and end the stream.